come to realise that I'm willing to go quite far to make a compelling image. And after experimenting with membranes like these for a long time, I became curious actually as to why I felt incredibly relaxed inside something that potentially looks quite terrifying, and actually what is happening on a physiological level to my body. Over the last 4 months, I've sort of self-prescribed momentary isolation, and I've been recording myself in various different sensory chambers to examine whether extreme human experience like isolating the body may be able to change brain patterns. So this is what I do. I push my body to extreme limits and create surreal experimentations, and I tend to use technology like it's a visceral, elastic membrane in a way for me to explore the physiology of the body. I trained in 14 years in classical ballet and 100-metre hurdles, so I've been exploring these limitations of my body since I was a kid, and most likely was the starting point into being interested in blurring the borders between the human body and technology. I work with synthetic biologists or scientists, connecting their expertise with storytelling as a way of merging health, beauty, biotechnology with science fiction. Outcomes of these can be films, artworks, installations, but I'm particularly interested in creating immersive experiences that make an audience feel uncomfortable or put them in a vulnerable situation. So this disruptive artistic study of technology began when I was working at Philips, the consumer electronics company, back in 2006. And I relocated from London, where I was working in architecture, and moved to Eindhoven to lead a team of engineers and designers in a far future design research program, predominantly looking at wearable technology, but our main focus was around emotional sensing. We were trying to understand what happens on a physiological level or a chemical level when you kiss someone for the first time, or when you brush past a stranger, and could we build sensitive technologies that blush or shiver with light? So we developed wearable concepts like this. This is the Bubble dress, using heart rate sensors and LED projectors, and depending upon whether she was aroused, excited or uncomfortable, these animations were happening on this screen around her. We also developed an electronic tattoo which implanted tiny magnetic balls underneath the skin, and they revealed an image as you touched the skin. And I think our main purpose was intentionally to be disruptive, to better understand cultural impacts, how emerging technologies may benefit the consumer, and how this would likely yield new business for Philips. So whilst I was at Philips, I began thinking about the role of skin and how skin could become a platform for innovation. And if technology is to become the size of a blood cell, then how might we ingest it? And how would this change the way we interact with products? And what would it do once it's inside our body? So I was emotionally stirred with this possibility of being able to reprogram biology away from disease and aging. And at the same time, I was interested in pheromone excretion and that the healthiest babies come from parents of opposite immune system. So in 2011, I created a swallowable perfume. Working with a synthetic biologist, we created this cosmetic pill that used the body's natural own processes to break down fats. And it was the idea that it's a protein impregnated with a fragrance that is excreted through the sweat glands when you perspire. So this technology enables the skin to sweat a genetically unique fragrance, which for me was really interesting when the body turned into the atomizer. And part of the project was also to explore human instinct and primal forms of communication. And in the case of the swallowable perfume, could we manipulate the immune system and create a unique scent that may change the way we seek sexual partners? This was the campaign.
swallowable perfume, a new cycle of evolution.
So within the first 48 hours, we received 2 million views, which was massively unexpected. And it showed the willingness of the media and public to engage in this concept. And at the same time, I created a website, I created an email address, and at the same time, I was contacted by large pharmaceutical companies offering to partner and commercialize the product. Requests came from the Middle East, from Japan, and their main interest was to have exclusive distribution and to be the first to launch in their country. And they sent me extensive confidential documents why they were the best company to partner with, who they distributed to. And it's my belief that they were mostly inspired by the innovation behind what we know as a traditional product, but they weren't aware of some of the medical benefits that could follow. So about a week later, I was speaking with these pharmaceutical companies. I started receiving A4 heartfelt emails from people suffering hyperhidrosis, an excessive sweating condition. And they were sharing personal stories about how their condition hindered every aspect of their life and that this product gave them such hope. And some even offered their body for research. How can I help you in your kind of mission? So what hit home for me, which took a while, was the power storytelling has on hopes and emotions, to be able to hover someone's imagination and really make them believe in a technology, and also the effect that it had on business development. And what happened was that this artistic provocation uncovered a gap in the market that mutually benefited the well-being, cosmetic and pharmaceutical industry. So following on from this kind of idea of using health and beauty as a way of storytelling and merging science fiction, I created a future day spa. So this also had a serendipitous curve to the swallowable perfume, and in this case I was interested in understanding the implications zero gravity had on the body, and in the end I ended up discovering something else. The project started with a conversation that I had with a NASA economist who said to me, we were sitting on a bus coming back from a TED event in Whistler, and he was very much focused on the incredible scenery, and finally turned around to me and said, NASA are concerned with the complications of growing a fetus in zero gravity. And for me, everything kind of came together in my mind and actually made a lot of sense. We know that the body is not designed to withstand the permanent rigors of weightlessness. So my questions were, how could we prepare the body for zero gravity? And also on a more personal level, could vulnerable or uncomfortable situations change behavior and emotion? And I wanted to particularly step away from making films and use gallery settings or events like today to be able to test some of my crude contraptions on strangers and be able to understand how other people may experience different forms of isolation. So this is the Future Day Spa, which we set up at a well-known technology conference in Los Angeles. You enter the spa, you're obviously not wearing cat suits, you're wearing your own clothes, you're asked to remove any sharp items, and then you lay down underneath this pressurized sheet, and it's a vacuum pressure which is delivered to your entire body. You close your eyes, and most people are induced into a state of relaxation. We measure basic biometric data and are looking for any kind of physiological changes. We've now tested this on 100 people, and the feedback, we've tested in the US and the UK, and the feedback has been quite vast. Some people said it felt like a relaxing nightmare. Other people said it got rid of my hangover and they came the next day and tried it again. Others said it felt like being inside the womb. But it was one gentleman's response that actually happened at the end of the conference in Los Angeles that really positively threw me and set me off on this other serendipitous curve that I mentioned. And during his treatment, he was nervous. You're stepping into, what is a clean room environment. You become the artwork in this future day spa. And he lay down in the bed and said to me, "Can I disclose something about myself?" And of course, I said yes. And he continued to say that he chose not to have any physical contact with any other person. He made it clear he doesn't touch anybody and nobody touched him. And as he lay there, he said that this felt like it was an embrace, and could he buy one and take one home for him? So this was obviously quite an interesting feedback for me. And when he came out of the bed, he stood up and he reached out and he hugged me. So it was a very, very interesting response. This video should be playing. Whoops. Doesn't seem to be playing. Doesn't matter. So what I became curious about was, why would someone choose to silence oxytocin release in the brain and prevent themselves from touch? And I was recently introduced to a professor at King's College, Professor Janet Treasure, who is working with patients with anorexia, and they are using synthesized oxytocin, and these young teenage, predominantly women, focus less on negative images of food and fat body parts after being treated with synthesized oxytocin. So I'm in the middle of piecing this whole kind of picture together. But what I'm interested in thinking about is, can I speculate experiences like the Future Day Spa may be able to naturally trigger the release of oxytocin in the brain, normally released during touch, sex or breastfeeding, and be developed to create new ways to relax or change behaviour or treat disorders like, here we go, treat things like eating disorders or social isolation. So moving on from there, the last project that I'll present is based on a book that I was recently given by Juan Enriquez called Evolving Ourselves, a compelling author. He's director of the Life Sciences Project at Harvard Business School, among many other things. And in his book, he suggests that we are in a very different phase of evolution. We're no longer driven just by nature. It's really about human choice. And he explores the evolutionary consequences of zapping the brain with light to be able to trigger pleasure or erase memory, or how can we change biology and curate life decades after an egg or sperm has left the body. So this book has really set the premise for this project, which is called the Institute of Isolation. And Juan is one of 5 experts working on this project. And following on from this interest in the complications of growing a fetus in zero gravity, I asked Juan about his thoughts on the procreation in space. So he said, you can't fundamentally change big aspects of the body. Our species is very limited when going interstellar. The time needed to get to any other star is so massive, even if you extend lifespans, which we'll hear about later this afternoon, it's very, very limited. And you'd spend lifetimes travelling. So he continues, you have 2 options. Build something that holds or transports consciousness until you can rebuild the body somewhere else, or send a printer and print the body when you get there. So what I took from this is, how can we begin to understand the body, mind, consciousness 4,000 generations ahead? And again, working with Alex McDonald, this NASA economist, he is also, NASA are focused on orbiting the moon for a year, which is part of validating systems required to travel through deep space to Mars. So what seemed disparate or kind of unrelated themes, my interest is in the psychology and science of isolation. And in the case of the mission to Mars, what happens when 4 people are travelling for decades in a very, very small space? we can easily measure physiology of the body, but the psychology is largely unpredictable. This is a scene from this film that I've been shooting, commissioned by London Science Museum, which will open in June, part of their Future of Health at the London Science Museum. So this is an observational documentary presenting myself as a member of the Institute of Isolation. It's a futuristic organisation composed of various different sensory chambers, and the purpose is to document and record myself and understand whether extreme isolation could actually shift brain patterns, and how this may become an evolved human capacity. So as an artist, I think my agenda is to provide unconventional, hybrid ways of not providing answers, but asking what are the conditions of possibility. Thank you very much for having me.
Crazy work, Lucy. Thank you. Just one quick question. You're thinking on behalf of the rest of us. You know, the artist shows us where the world will be going, where the creative issues, the tensions will be. There's a lot of people here who have like more conventional jobs than you, who are working for, you know, insurance companies, big medical organizations, hospitals. Give them a takeaway. What should they do with all this knowledge that you're creating?
I am an honest believer that businesses, brands, companies, if you can operate more like an artistic studio where you introduce creative processes, allow for spaces for chaos, serendipity early on in any kind of new innovative or technology process, that you open up such a vaster or bigger area of possibility and tap research spin-offs that you might never have imagined. So I guess that's the way that I've come to do what I do.
That'd be great. So next to the hospital's kind of maker lab, there'll be the isolation unit.
Absolutely, I'll make sure it happens.
Lucy McRae, thank you.
Thank you.